Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking non-spoilers about the Dungeons & Dragons film that just released a couple of weeks ago now. So grab your teleporting staff, slap your natural 20s on the table, and try not to get your ass eaten by a mimic. Not your ass, but... So Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves is directed by John Francis Daley, Jonathan Goldstein, and it's written by the aforementioned as well as Michael Gilio. Film stars Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, and regé-jean Page. And it's a quest-filled story about a father trying to do right by his daughter with a gang of misfits and all the wrong ways to find a lost relic. I want to kind of get this out of the way. This film is charming, it is exciting, it is entertaining, it is the dreaded F word in the film community. You know the word, film fans. But unfortunately, the team who created this film rolled a big fat one and got their asses eaten by that mimic because this film cost about $150 million to make reportedly, and as of recording this, it's only brought in about $159 worldwide. That might sound like it made $9 million, but that's not even close to the case. One, they don't get all that box office money, and two, you can basically double the film's budget due to marketing alone. So this film is unfortunately going to flop. It's going to be a little bit of a disappointment. And however long this film is going to remain in theaters from this point on, it is very unlikely that this film is going to break even. And honestly, through no fault of the film's quality, I genuinely think that it had something to do with the marketing or maybe just the name of the IP and the stink of the 2001 film that came out. Who can say? But it's a shame because I really want a sequel to this film. And unless they had a certain plan going in, I don't think we're going to get one. However, there is hope. If the production company went into this knowing that they're going to have to take an L financially just to lay the groundwork for a good film with good characters that people can like and want to come back to, then I think there is hope that we can get more sequels. But that's really just riding on if that's the plan, because there is so much potential with this IP and they could do so many different things that would be really fun to see on screen, especially with this cast or even future cast, however they decide to do it. But anyways, let's talk about the film. So this review will be my opinion, and the way I want to do it is go into what I liked, what I didn't like, and things that they can improve on in the future, as well as give it a final rating. Now, don't be afraid if you haven't ever played Dungeons & Dragons or even know what it is for the most part, besides it just being kind of like a tabletop role-playing game. You don't need to going into it. There's still a good story with good, fun characters here, and I think there's a lot that you can kind of latch onto without even knowing the lore. If you are a fan, I think, having the burden of knowledge, you might be a little bit nitpicky about certain things, but I think there's still a lot of good nods and a lot of fun to be had here. Okay, things I like. I want to start by praising the cast, and by proxy, the tone of the film. I feel like casting Chris Pine, you know what you're going to get. Some sort of combination of dry comedy and heart. He is someone who has proven he can be a great leading role, and he plays well with other cast members, no pun intended. And I think by making this movie have a more comedic tone, not taking itself too seriously, but also not being too laissez-faire with it, it was a good choice. You can get invested in the stories and character motivations while letting your guard down just enough to enjoy the ride. Michelle Rodriguez's Holga was fantastic. She's a badass stoic warrior that kind of embodies that emo friend that everybody has. Not to say that she is emo, but she kind of has that I don't want to say background personality, that's kind of offensive, but someone who kind of keeps to themselves. They kind of just observe the room and everyone's nonsense, and just every once in a while chime in with some sort of sarcastic line, whether it's meant to be sarcastic or not. Just something that's offensive, but funny. So I think she did well. And honestly, everyone plays their parts pretty well. I think Justice Smith was a good portrayal of a down on his luck sorcerer. I was kind of sour on him a couple years ago because I didn't really like him in that Jurassic World film he was in, nor did I like that film. But ever since Detective Pikachu and a couple other things he's been in, he's really kind of been endearing me, and I'm excited to see where he goes with his career. And his character of Simon was pretty charming and had a decent amount of depth to him. Sophia Lillis and Daisy Head played their roles well, not just in the story, but in, meta. Daisy Head plays a red witch who I am into, and Sophia Lillis' Doric is a druid with a very fun escape scene, and she has a personal grudge against the powers that be in the film, so it's pretty easy to get on board with her character. And that brings me to my next the story. I think it's a simple story, but it's woven in a way that makes you care about the character and motivations and what they want, you want for them as well. And I think they just did a good job knocking out a solid story with not really any big twists or turns, but I don't think every story needs that. I think it's mostly just about the character journey, and I enjoyed watching these characters' journey. And the pacing is good overall. The action and fight choreography are good here. I could watch Michelle Rodriguez do that all day long. Is this review getting horny? There are also a series of like really clever sequences that my theater was very much into, and you can hear the people who play D&D like slow clapping from time to time. Pretty cool stuff. Visual effects, sometimes good, sometimes corny, but even when it's corny, I still like it. Maybe that's because it did feel like a D&D campaign in certain parts and you can deal with a little bit of camp because the characters and the story are there. And it also feels like a campaign without like too much winking and nodding to the camera. There definitely are a couple instances where it feels like they do that, but for the most part, it's not like every time. There's just, I think, again, the story is woven in such a way where you forget you're watching a D&D movie sometimes and you're just watching a fantasy movie. The next like is kind of like a hybrid, and honestly the perfect segue into the dislike section because it is twofold. The comedy. I think, honestly, the comedy was good for the most part. Don't get me wrong. There are definitely some scenes where I was like grinning like a bobcat, but at the other end of things, there are a few instances where, just for example, like Hugh Grant, he's very funny in the film. Don't get me wrong. He was very charming and delightful, but there are a few instances where maybe they just let him ad-lib like one or two lines a little bit too long. And the other thing I noticed too was it almost felt like there was a sense of like pausing for laughter in like a live show or something. I can't quite explain it, but there was just like, I think they could have shaved like 2 whole seconds off of like certain comedy beats at certain points, specifically with Hugh Grant. Again, he was charming and he probably was the funniest part of this. But yeah, I could have done with a little bit less pausing for audience laughter. But that wraps it up for the likes, so let's talk about the dislikes. This is not just going to be things I hated about this movie. In fact, there's not really much I hate about it. It's just going to be a few things that I think they could do better in the future. So hopefully a little bit more constructive than just complaining. I think they could have honestly done with a few more minutes of character building. The runtime doesn't have a lot of fat on it, which is good, but I think they could have even added maybe 5-10 more minutes of the movie just kind of developing the side characters a little bit more, like Simon, Justice Smith's character, and Doric, Sophia Lillis's character. Just a few more minutes of it. I think what was there was effective enough for you to just kind of be on board with these characters, but I wouldn't have minded them slowing down a little bit because there are a few scenes, like especially one with Michelle Rodriguez, where they kind of do a little side quest for her, like a personal side quest, so she can get some closure on something. And I thought that was great. I kind of wish they would have maybe not done it with every character, but maybe just 1 or 2 more characters. Another dislike is the villains are a little bit one note. There are technically 2 villains. One is definitely more one note than the other. If you can hear a plane, I apologize. And the other villain is definitely more personable, without giving away any spoilers. But definitely the Red Witch is not very developed. Having seen the movie just a few days ago, I can't really tell you what she was after other than doing big evil thing to make people her slaves or something, kind of generic. And I understand sometimes in campaigns, villains can be generic just to kind of give more focus to the players. But yeah, I could have just done with a villain that had a little bit more character motivation than simply evil for the sake of being evil. Get us to care, get us to care about the villain too. And lastly, I could have done with more dragons in Dungeons and Dragons. There are dragons in this, or at least I don't want to give away spoilers or anything. Nothing about the dragons is really even too spoilery, and that's kind of my point. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of dragon in this. That's a lot of dragon, but there's not a lot of dragons. See what I'm saying? And I just, dragon lore in D&D is pretty crazy, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more focus on that, or at least, at the very least, a little bit more setup on that in case they do future installments that like involve dragons more. It's in the title, and I like dragons. But again, like everything in this film, what's there is effective and entertaining. Okay, so this movie is getting good word of mouth. I think that's important if they want to do future installments, which I really hope they do. And I think that can build a good enough framework for what's hopefully coming next. One thing they need to do, though, is better marketing. I mean, yes, there were trailers. There were a couple pretty entertaining trailers, but I didn't really see anything that was like super promotional, like maybe like a tie-in with Dungeons and Dragons or something. Maybe there was, but I didn't see it. And I'm pretty on top of like film news and stuff. So I think maybe a bigger push for something more promotional, more game tie-in could have done them well. And I don't really know what else they could do. I'm not a film marketer, but I think whatever they do, it has to be more robust. Now, in my reviews moving forward, I want to move away from doing number scale ratings and get more into like excitement levels. as the rating, although this is a D&D movie, so I would rate this movie a solid 15 with modifier 3 on a charisma check. I wanted to like this movie, and I wanted it to succeed, but I don't lie to myself, and luckily I didn't have to, because I did like this movie. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's succeeding, but what's here I think is good, and they could build off of it, and I want to see them do that more. This is a solid start to hopefully a franchise of movies that gets to explore the vast lore and possibilities that this IP has to offer. If you're not a D&D fan, if you're not, I think if you give it a chance, there's plenty to love here. And if you are a fan, then again, you have a similar experience, but I imagine there will be more to critique and be scrutinous of because you have, again, that burden of knowledge, but also just as much to enjoy. All right, guys, that's the review. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Did you like this movie if you saw it? If you didn't see it, are you planning on seeing it in the future? I'll be down in the comment section talking to you guys, so roast me in the comments and have a magical day.